What happened in the year 1961? This video is specific to the year 1961. Before the main feature, I'd like to tell you about the comics and cartoons that debuted this year. Comic strip debuts of 1961. Amy, a funny comic strip about a young blonde girl with a ponytail. It wasn't a mega hit like some strips, but it ran until 1991. Apartment 3G. This was a hugely popular soap opera strip that ran until 2015. Flintstones. The Flintstones got their very own comic strip in 1961. It never became as popular as the cartoon series or comic books, but it ran until 1998. A pretty impressive run. Health capsules. This popular panel answers readers' health-related questions and includes a humorous illustration. Peanuts. The Peanuts comic strip had been around since 1950, but the character of Frida, with her naturally curly hair, made her debut in 1961. This is also the year we first hear about the little red-haired girl, Charlie Brown's unattainable Venus. Sam Strip. This unique gag strip only ran from 1961 to 63. It was created by Mort Walker and Jerry Dumas. Walker had already been famous for his super successful strips Beetle Bailey and High and Lois. It featured a lot of cameos of other comic strip characters, a practice that, surprisingly, still isn't done all that often. As far as Sam Strip was concerned, that was the main thing. Although this comic strip didn't last, it later inspired the sequel strip, Sam and Silo, in 1977. Although that one was more of a regular comic strip, it was far more popular and ran until 2016. Comic book debuts of 1961. Archie Comics. The Archie Comics publisher isn't usually remembered for their superheroes. What may surprise you is the fact that they had a lot of them at one time, going way back to the golden age of comics when the publisher was still called MLJ. In 1961, Archie released two new heroes. Fly Girl, the sexy sidekick of the Fly, first appeared in Adventures of the Fly number 13. The Jaguar made his very first appearance in Adventures of the Jaguar number 1. Charlton Comics. Charlton had a thing this year of making comic book series based on new monster movies. These included Gorgo, Conga, and Reptilicus. The most successful of these would be Gorgo. The series ran until 1965. It expanded upon the story that started with the movie. Gorgo and her baby were actually the heroes of these comics and had fantastic adventures. Conga was also a successful series. Reptilicus lasted only 2 issues before Charlton's rights to use the name lapsed. Beginning with the 3rd issue, it was retitled Reptosaurus and ran through 1962 with issue number 8. After that, it had a one-shot special in 1963. Also in 1963, Reptosaurus made a cameo in Charlton's other movie monster-based comic, Gorgo number 12. DC Comics. At this time, DC was still in the process of rebooting some of their older characters. They had a lot of success with this after they redid The Flash in 1956. 2 characters to get the treatment this year included the Atom and Hawkman, both having made their original debuts in 1940. The Atom people got to know better made his debut in Showcase number 34. He wasn't the first miniature superhero by a long shot, but he became one of the most popular along with Marvel's later creation, Ant-Man. The new Hawkman, and Hawkgirl as well, debuted in Brave and the Bold number 34. It was now established that they were aliens. DC also introduced Earth 2 and, on a bigger scale, the concept of a multiverse in The Flash number 123. The new Flash character meets the old Flash character. DC ran two different mainstream continuities for many years. This would lead to a lot of confusion and contradiction where the older comics were concerned. On a personal note, I never liked multiverses or alternate realities in comics. It never worked then, and it doesn't work now. It just confuses people and gets them uninterested in the characters. Then the publisher has to reboot everything again. The original Batgirl, real name Betty King, debuted in Batman number 139. She was the blonde sidekick of the original Batwoman. An entirely new Batgirl character was created in 1967 and became much more popular. Sinestro, Green Lantern's most popular villain, debuted in Green Lantern Volume 2, number 7. One of Superman's best-known villains, General Zod, made his comic debut this year in Adventure Comics number 283. He didn't become really popular until the movies Superman and Superman 2 in 1978 and 81. Then again with Man of Steel in 2013. He's notable for being one of Superman's most bloodthirsty foes. The Haunted Tank made its debut in GI Combat number 87. Set in World War II, a tank is haunted by Confederate General Jeb Stuart to help America win the war. Stuart's ghost could only be seen by his descendants or soldiers who were dying. Dell Comics. Magica de Spell makes her debut in Uncle Scrooge number 36. She became even more popular in the classic DuckTales cartoon of the 1980s. Magica was an evil Italian sorceress duck. And who doesn't love that name? Mad Magazine. The famous comic magazine from the EC Comics publisher came out with two popular long-running features this year. Dave Berg wrote and drew The Lighter Side of, which was a gentle satire on everyday subjects. It ran until 2002. Spy vs. Spy, created by Antonio Prohias, became one of the most famous parts of Mad Magazine, period. The premise is simple. A spy in white and a spy in black try to wipe each other out. You don't always know which color is going to win until the end. Marvel Comics. Amazing Adventures number 1 came out this year. It was the first series of this name from Marvel. This issue also marked the first appearance of Dr. Droom, Marvel's very first Silver Age of Comics superhero. He was a supernatural monster hunter. You haven't heard of Dr. Droom? Don't feel too bad. He didn't stick around long. By issue number 7, the series was reformatted and retitled as Amazing Adult Fantasy. The character of Dr. Droom remained in obscurity for years as Marvel had much more success with others like Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, to name only a few. He would not return in comics until 1976, when he was renamed to Dr. Druid. Why was he renamed? This was done to avoid confusion with Marvel's popular supervillain, Dr. Doom, who would make his first appearance in 1962. Amazing Adult Fantasy also started in 1961. Of course it started with issue number 7, but it ran to number 14 under this title. The series didn't take well and was set to be cancelled. With number 15, in 1962, the title was renamed to just Amazing Fantasy. Why is any of this significant? Because that's the issue that introduced Spider-Man and became one of the most famous comic book covers of all time. Not too bad for a series that flopped. Fantastic Four number 1 introduced a superhero team of the same name. It also introduced their first major villain, Mole Man. This was Marvel's very first big success. It was their initial answer to DC's popular Justice League of America comics. It wouldn't be until 1963 that Marvel created a more direct rival with their Avengers comics. The Fantastic Four was unique on a number of levels. The team was actually like a family. They didn't have secret identities since everyone knew their real names. Their superhero names were more like nicknames. There was a lot of humor in it, especially in the early years, along with some very unique storytelling. The superhero team also had regular people problems like paying rent, relationship troubles, and other such things. They were very relatable. The characters also had their own unique personality quirks and things going on. The Fantastic Four, certainly at this time, was a very interesting comic. Stan Lee gets the credit for creating the Fantastic Four. It really broke him out as Marvel's main man, and, ultimately, the most famous person to ever work in comic books. The creation of Fantastic Four, along with many other Marvel heroes, has been in great dispute. Jack Kirby, who was the original artist for Fantastic Four, had created the earlier team of Challengers of the Unknown for DC back in 1957. There are a lot of similarities between these two teams. The Fantastic Four got so much more popular. This has always been a hot button in the Stan Lee-Jack Kirby feud. Cartoon debuts of 1961. AP Films, Jerry Anderson. Supercar. This really isn't a cartoon, but it's certainly a children's show. Supercar debuted in Britain. It was a sci-fi adventure show using marionette puppets, a process creator Jerry Anderson called supermarionation. This did very well and led to 3 later series: Fireball XL5 in 1962, Stingray in 1964, and his most famous production, Thunderbirds, in 1965. All of these shows would eventually find their way onto American television. Art Clokey. Davy and Goliath. Art Clokey, creator of Gumby, also created this Christian-themed cartoon series with similar stop-motion animation. It ran for 3 seasons through 1964, then had a 2-season revival from 1971 to 73. 7 specials were made from 1965 to 2004. Disney. Ludwig von Drake. This legendary character made his debut in the first episode of Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. He would later appear in the Donald Duck comic strip later that year and receive his own comic book series from Dell. For some reason, the character never really takes in comics, but is used quite heavily on television and other special productions. He was a goofy Austrian scientist and uncle to Donald Duck. 101 Dalmatians. This theatrically released animated film was a major hit and easily the most popular cartoon to have come out in 1961. Who doesn't love lots and lots of spotted puppies? It also features one of Disney's best known and most bizarre villains, Cruella de Vil. Does she ever get her Dalmatian puppy coat? I think not. Format Films. The Alvin Show. The first cartoon series of Alvin and the Chipmunks aired for 1 season on CBS. It was shown in reruns quite a bit for the rest of the decade and for a short time in 1979. The revival series of the 1980s became much better known and longer lasting. Reruns of this classic were played on the Nickelodeon cable channel from 1994 to 96. No station in America has aired it since. Cartoons from this show have rarely been released on any home media. People seem to like this series and want to see it, but it doesn't get a lot of respect from the people who actually own it. Fred Ladd. The Underseas Explorers. Here we go! The rarest, most obscure cartoon to come out this year. It was a series of short, educational cartoons that aired in syndication. It taught you about marine life. This is so hard to find that you can barely find pictures of it online, let alone any episodes. It is said to be like an underwater version of the later, much more popular Johnny Quest, especially with their foreign boy character named Romby, similar to Haji. Ironically, there would be another cartoon series very similar to this called The Undersea Adventures of Captain Nemo. That came out in 1975 and was a bit more successful, becoming a segment of the popular Captain Kangaroo show. What made the idea work in 1975, but not 1961? Who can say? Hal Seeger. Out of the Inkwell. This was a short-lived revival of the classic Out of the Inkwell cartoons from Fleischer Studios, starring Coco the Clown. Besides the main character himself, it bore little resemblance to the earlier cartoons. It was in color, had sound, and gave Coco more of a supporting cast. There was his girlfriend, Coquette the Clown, and a rival of sorts named Mean Mo. Coco himself was a lot friendlier than he had been in the old days. The on-screen battles between Coco and his creator Max Fleischer could get pretty brutal. Although Fleischer himself was still alive and played a part in developing this cartoon, he really wasn't a big part of the stories. Larry Storch, later of TV's F-Troop fame, did the voices. This was a charming little cartoon series that, sadly, has become a great obscurity. You can't find more than a few of these anywhere. Hopefully, a complete collection will someday find itself on DVD. Hanna-Barbera. Top Cat. This was essentially the Phil Silvers show in cat face. The premise was similar to that sitcom, also known as Sergeant Bilko. It was different for a cartoon because it didn't rely heavily on characters getting beat or blown up. There was a lot of trickery instead, and it was a very smart cartoon. The Yogi Bear Show. Yogi Bear, originally a backing segment of Huckleberry Hound, finally gets his own show. His show marks the debuts of Snagglepuss and Yacky Doodle. K-Row Productions. Calvin and the Colonel. This aired on ABC for just one season. It was an animated remake of Amos and Andy. More accurately, it was like Andy and the Kingfish, since there was no real equivalent of the Amos character. The characters were made into animals to avoid the touchy racial issues that had plagued Amos and Andy. This show belly flopped in the ratings, and barely lasted its one and only season. The connection to Amos and Andy, even with them being animals, really hurt it. The original voice actors of Amos and Andy, Freeman Gosden and Charles Correll, appeared on this show. People who were still fans of the real Amos and Andy didn't seem to appreciate the watered-down version of the show they loved so much. Truthfully, this cartoon didn't get a fair shake from anyone. It's not bad at all, especially for a kid-friendly TV cartoon. This is what happens when you pay attention to politics and cancel culture. Much younger people, who have no idea what Amos and Andy was or the controversy behind it, find these cartoons online and seem to like them just fine. Looney Tunes. Not much going on in Looney Tunes this year besides a handful of good cartoons, but they did introduce a new character. Although minor, he was memorable. Hugo the Abominable Snowman made his first appearance in the Bugs Bunny cartoon, The Abominable Snow Rabbit. As far as real Looney Tunes cartoons go, he was not seen again until the spaced out bunny cartoon from the 1980 TV special Bugs Bunny's Bustin' Out All Over. After that, he's made a handful of minor appearances in newer Looney Tunes cartoons. MGM. Real Tom and Jerry cartoons stopped in 1958. They just did. I don't care what anyone says. The classic Tom and Jerry cartoons are still the most popular. Well, MGM didn't have their own animation department anymore, but they still wanted Tom and Jerry cartoons. They hired director Gene Deitch to make new Tom and Jerry cartoons. Rembrandt Films, a studio from Czechoslovakia, did the animation. They ended up making 12 new Tom and Jerry cartoons from 1961 to 62. These cartoons are extremely weird and lack the cuteness that made Tom and Jerry so endearing in the first place. At the time, they were commercially successful, but they were clearly living off the Tom and Jerry name. These cartoons stink. I'm not the only one who thinks so. Rankin Bass. Tales of the Wizard of Oz. This was the second ever cartoon series from Rankin Bass, and the first to feature traditional hand-drawn animation. If you're expecting something like the MGM musical, this ain't it. This is a series of short little cartoons featuring the Oz characters doing various funny things. The animation is crude and cheap. The voice work, however, is quite good, and the stories are creative. It's not one of the studio's best-known cartoons, but has a cult following. Had the animation been a little bit better, this could have been a great hit. Such low budgets for TV cartoons can really hurt the final product. UPA. The Dick Tracy Show. The same studio that created Mr. Magoo created this cartoon show of Dick Tracy. It lasted just one season. I like the cartoon, but it's weird. It isn't very much like the Dick Tracy comic strip. The comic strip is a bit more violent and wouldn't translate well into a kid-friendly cartoon show. As a matter of fact, you don't see all that much of Dick Tracy. You see him in the beginning of the cartoon segments and at the end. Rarely will you see him in the middle part of the cartoon. He hands off an important case to one of his more cartoony underlings. The silly character would go after Dick Tracy's classic villains, who always worked in pairs. Some people like this show, and some people hate it. Despite having only one season of episodes, it was successful and aired in reruns for many years. It was brought back in reruns during the 1990 release of the hit film Dick Tracy, but has largely disappeared since then besides a complete series DVD release. Stay tuned after the main feature to find out about the popular songs, movies, and television of 1961. And now... Dun 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 dun! Main feature!
Britain's elder statesman, the man who symbolized the strength and courage of a war-beleaguered people, celebrates his 87th birthday. Sir Winston Churchill's home in Hyde Park Gate, London, is showered with gifts from well-wishers to the man who stands among the greats in British history. His pace may have slowed, but indomitable as ever, he prepares to go to the House of Commons for a bipartisan tribute. The man who led his people through some of their darkest days, Mr. Churchill will live in the hearts of free people as one of the great men of our age. Happy birthday to Sir Winston. May there be happy years ahead. It's moving day for royalty on the other side of the world. The Japanese Emperor Hirohito is preparing to move with his family into a new home that will serve as the imperial household. A blend of modern and traditional Japanese styles, the house is the acme of comfort without being palatial. By coincidence, moving day for the man who was once called the Son of Heaven comes on the 20th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. The Western influence has invaded the palace grounds. Or there's a barbecue pit in the garden, air conditioning, television, and hi-fi in the house. It may not be a palace, but it's fit for an emperor. At the White House, President Kennedy receives Helen Keller. Deaf and blind since childhood, Miss Keller's hands, tapped by her companion Evelyn Side in the finger code, provide her chief perception and communication with the world around her. Miss Keller's life has made her a symbol of hope and achievement for the handicapped. In her remarkable career, she has met every president since Grover Cleveland. Now 80 years of age, but still alert and vigorous, Helen Keller continues her inspiring way. Queen Elizabeth's tour of India coincides with the nation's 11th anniversary celebration of independence. For its royal visitor, the closeness of traditional and Commonwealth ties of friendship with Britain. At a press conference, President Kennedy outlines the West's reply to Khrushchev's threats to sign a peace treaty with East Germany. It's the night of the Blue Ribbon Sweepstakes in Hollywood, the Oscar Awards. Screen luminaries Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh are among the celebrities present. And so is Gene Simmons. Tonight climaxes a year of hard work. Tonight the best efforts in motion picture production are rewarded. Eva Marie Saint announces the best supporting actor.
The winner is Peter Ustinov in Spartacus.
Mr. Ustinov gets his Oscar for his work in Universal Pictures' Spartacus. a spectacle that won 4 awards for a major share of the night's honors. A versatile writer, actor, and director, the bearded Mr. Ustinov is a popular choice with everyone. Hugh Griffith and the presentation for the Best Supporting Actress.
Miss Shirley Jones.
Shirley Jones came from the musical comedy stage to gain further triumphs in movies, and tonight is the grand climax to her career. She receives close to an ovation from the glittering crowd. The tension mounts as Greer Garson announces the Best Actor.
And the winner is Burt Lancaster.
Burt Lancaster played a convincing preacher in Sinclair Lewis's Elma Gantry, a demanding role. Well done. Things move to a climax as all eyes are on Yul Brynner and the Best Actress of the Year award.
Elizabeth Taylor.
Convalescing from her recent grave illness, Elizabeth Taylor receives a prolonged accolade from the audience. It's a popular choice, an Oscar for the beauty who is a winner after 4 successive tries. Audrey Hepburn and the year's Best Picture.
The Apartment, Billy Wilder.
Billy Wilder accepts as producer. A gala night for Filmland. In Paris, the rites of spring begin in the chill of winter with the unveiling of new hats for the new season. This one is trimmed with 2 large roses, very feminine and very right for spring. Here's a convertible eye catcher, white toque with on-again, off-again straw picture brim. Here's a perky chapeau of Italian straw. Black leather has interesting possibilities, too. Dark satin, trimmed in black, gives this creation after dark glamour. To enhance the mood, add a horsehair veil to this straw toque. Sou'westers are in to make sure this season won't pass without its fashion controversy. Call it chic or call it coal scuttle, as you will. You have to admit it's striking. Far-out fashions for men, tailored by some of the continent's leading stylists, take the spotlight for summer. It's a turnabout from the usual fashion show in which the drab male sets off the colorful attire of the opposite sex. The American influence is apparent in this cocktail cowboy suit. Fancy Dan cuffs on the trousers. Plenty of fancy trim is evident from neckline to ankle. Fine feathers for the bird with a flair for fashion. New heights in entertainment are promised airline passengers as Walter Slezak delivers a print of the first motion picture to be shown aloft on a regular schedule. It's a print of Universal International's Come September, which stars Rock Hudson, Gina Lollobrigida, and Sandra Dee with Bobby Darin and Mr. Slezak. He has beautiful accompaniment as he boards the jet for the inaugural flight of Movies Aloft. They will be shown on 5 transcontinental trips and on flights to Europe. Curtain going up, so shades are lowered. The projector is hidden in the ceiling of the plane, and each passenger has lightweight earphones. So you just sit back, relax, and have a true bird's eye view of why movies are better than ever. Walter Slezak has a coveted role in Come September, and at this preview, the actor has a chance to be his own critic. He seems satisfied with his performance. Gina Lollobrigida would make a cross-country hop worthwhile, even if you had no place to go. 1961 was a year of international tensions, compounded by crisis after crisis. It was a year of riots in Cairo to protest Lumumba's death. It was Cuba in a red regime and Castro's boast that he had always been a communist. It was Chombe and warfare in the Congo, with that young nation torn asunder by civil strife. 1961 was Laos, now under the uneasy rule of a neutralist regime. And it was South Vietnam, battling red guerrilla. It was the year that the Algerian War continued to pit brother against brother. This was 1961. In January, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was sworn in as the 35th President of the United States and began the momentous task of guiding the nation through the critical years ahead. It was a solemn ceremony as he took the oath of office and assumed the burden laid down by Mr. Eisenhower. For a time, the very effectiveness of the United Nations was threatened when Dag Hammarskjöld was killed while on a peace mission to the Congo. The great apostle of peace had assumed his post in 1953 and brought to his work a dedication that won him international respect even from the Russians. They tried to remove him, but they could never question his integrity. U Thant of Burma succeeded Mr. Hammarskjöld to guide the UN during the parlous times it faces. Man had his first great success in space when the Russians pushed a man across the threshold. He was Yuri Gagarin, the astronaut the Russians lionized as the first to orbit the Earth. It was the propaganda coup of the year. After the Russian flight, U.S. plans were accelerated. Commander Alan B. Shepard was sent into suborbital flight. Unlike the Russian venture, this took place in the white-hot glare of worldwide publicity. The Mercury capsule is right on course as the commander took over the controls to become the first man to guide a spacecraft. 115 miles up, he went 300 miles downrange, right on target, and was picked up by waiting helicopters. The triumph of Alan B. Shepard, U.S. space pioneer. Following in Commander Shepard's star-studded footsteps came Captain Virgil Grissom. Everything is A-OK until the heartbreaking finale. As the captain prepared to leave the capsule, explosive bolts on the escape hatch let go, and the Mercury is lost. However, the moon gets closer. The line of demarcation in the Cold War lies in Berlin. West Berlin, with its burgeoning prosperity, is a thorn in the side of the Reds. Refugees from the east escaped by the tens of thousands until the communists in desperation threw up their wall of hate to seal off the border. In a decade, more than 4 million East Germans fled their homes, causing a drain on communist Germany's economy that was called no longer tolerable. Their answer, the wall. Now entire families are separated, their only communication a wave from a distance. This is heartbreak. This is the poignant drama not found in the reports of diplomats. A bride in the East can only wave to her mother in the West. She takes her vows in public loneliness. The border is strengthened, but still they escape. She hangs from a second-story window. The Red police try to pull her back. The Westerners try to free their grip. East Germans grasp any fleeting chance. A guard's back is turned, the barbed wire is slashed, and Westerners stretch forth willing hands to pull them to asylum. They gamble that a sudden rifle shot won't end their dreams, that a slip won't bring disaster. Freedom is man's most prized possession, and it is only for those who love it. The future of the United Nations lies at stake upon the Congo issue.
We believe that the only way to keep the Cold War out of the Congo is to keep the United Nations in the Congo. And we call on the Soviet Union to join us in thus ensuring the free and untrammeled exercise by the Congolese people of their right to independence and to democracy. Mr. President, it is the security of all peoples which is threatened by this statement and by the proposals of the Soviet government.
The speech is interrupted by a well-organized demonstration in the gallery. Most of the group are American Negroes, members of African nationalist groups in New York. It's the most violent demonstration by spectators in the World Organization's history. The effect is to underscore the gravity of the Soviet threat. But Hammarskjöld stands firm, refusing to bow to communist pressure. His contention that disaster would result if UN troops leave the Congo is backed both by President Kennedy and by India's neutralist Prime Minister Nehru. As the riot is slowly put down, the stage is set for a test between the free world and the communist bloc, the most critical moment in the 15 years of the United Nations' existence. Roger Maris left and Mickey Mantle were murder and mayhem for the Yankees. Maris bloomed with his long ball in 1961 and scattered home runs into the stands like hailstones. He led an assault along with Mantle on Babe Ruth's home run record of 60. And for a while it was nip and tuck as to which of the two would be the one to break the record set by the Babe in 1927. Since Ruth's day, the season has been expanded, and Maris did not hit his 61st until the Yankees' final game. He didn't break the old mark within 154 games, but a new record he did chalk up. The Yankees were in the World Series again in 1961 against the Cincinnati Reds. Whitey Ford led the assault and pitched brilliant ball. His pitching, along with Yankee power, gave them the World Championship 4-1. Basketball in Boston. It's the NBA Finals with Bill Russell, number 6, brilliantly spearheading the Celtics before a capacity crowd of 14,000. The Boston Quintet dazzles the St. Louis Hawks with their fast break attack. Visitors fight back to trail by only 5 points in the third period. Then Russell, Cousy, Heinzone and company start clicking. Playmaker Cousy, number 14, is in evidence all through the playoffs. With time running out, the Celtics have a solid lead, but they're still going. They clinched the series 4-1 with a winning score of 121 to 112. Watch Cousy slump exhausted as the final buzzer sounds. The price for the all-out play that brings the Celtics their 3rd straight title. The Braves meet the Giants in Milwaukee in that select circle. The say-hey boy was hitless in this series against the Braves until today, but he bounces back with a vengeance. Football provided some spine-chilling thrills. In the season's pro opener, Tim Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles took the opening kickoff from 5 yards behind his goal line and romped 105 yards for a touchdown. Ohio State had a brilliant season, and one of the reasons was Chuck Bryant, who took a pass from Joe Spama and snaked his way for a 62-yard tally. Ernie Davis, Heisman Trophy winner as the outstanding college football player of the year, sparked the Syracuse team with runs such as this one. That number 44 was murdered to the opposition. And as a grand finale, here's Dave Ramey of Michigan taking an Ohio State kickoff all the way home. 1961, a year of thrills in sports. For everybody from racing fans to football enthusiasts, 1961 was a year to remember. Once again, it's Carnival in Viareggio. And as in years past, as far as memory reaches, the Italian seaside town stages its inimitable extravaganza, the culmination of a year of planning and devoted labor. Imagination runs riot. One float is a mocking tribute to horror film star Count Dracula. King Baudouin of Belgium is caricatured, dragging the burdens of state, followed by a Charles de Gaulle in the same plight. A touch of topical comment doesn't seem to affect the gaiety of Carnival. After Carnival comes Lent, but let tomorrow take care of itself, says Viareggio. An oddball invention out of the past, but one with no future, was this tri-amphibian vehicle. It was tested in Washington by inventor Constantino Vlachos, whose own future was in doubt for a while. Vlachos was burned but not scared off. As soon as he got better, he was back to the old drawing board. Great art can be a moving experience, but if it moves, is it necessarily great? Avant-garde artists have put together a collection of modern mobiles on display in Holland that may be art and that certainly move, but it's every man his own art critic from here on. This little item not only classifies as far-out sculpture, but also turns out dandy abstract paintings. The scene is the Municipal Museum of Amsterdam, which goes for modern art all the way, which should dispose of the old myth about the Dutch being unimaginative. Whether you like it or not, it's enough to set anybody's head spinning. Time for the Navy Junior Boxing Finals at Annapolis, the 42nd in the series of bouts for Pee Wee pugilists, ranging from 5 to 14 years old, and all raring to go, every man jack. Spike Webb, famous Navy boxing coach, presides, and the first competitors have at it. This is really the paperweight division. Tiny tots with great big gloves and a double knockdown. These phantoms are game little scrappers. Learning to dish it out and to take it at an early age is Navy tradition. Whatever happens, they keep the leather flying. This bout finds one junior boxer with a wait-and-see strategy. He mostly plays it cool, doesn't believe in wasting ammunition, but the other fella keeps up a barrage. He finally connects, literally nosing out the loser. Ah, a tough rap. There's one place in New England where basketball is the summer sport. It's at Bob Cousy's camp, Greylag, near Pittsfield, New Hampshire. The famed Boston Celtics basketball star is a man who knows how to combine business with pleasure. He has his small charges goggle-eyed at the way he can handle that ball. Time for lessons, and you can bet that nobody cuts classes here. Bob has willing and apt pupils as he passes on what he has learned during his years as a star. He's famed for his long pass as he sets up shots for the boys. But what Cousy likes best, and that goes for the kids, is when everybody gangs up to try to stop one of the game's greatest dribblers. He could probably dribble all over Times Square during rush hour without the help of a traffic cop. But let the small fry grow a few inches, and he won't get away with this. Or will he?
The Bulls seem to be holding their own. The hospitals hung out their standing room only signs early. When you get grounded by a bull, the best thing to do is stay grounded and hope. Maybe the reason the Bulls are doing so well is that they stayed sober. A more even contest is this one. They're both stunned for a minute. Mark it up as a draw. As for the bullfighters, hold their aching backs.
A few other big events of 1961. What were the celebrity deaths of 1961? Leo Carrillo, perhaps best known for playing the likable but dim-witted sidekick Pancho on TV's The Cisco Kid. I like this guy. In real life, he was anything but stupid and a man with many talents. The very famous Leo Carrillo State Park in California is named after him. Jeff Chandler, popular actor, died at the age of 42 due to complications during surgery. His best-known role is Cochise in Broken Arrow from 1950. Ty Cobb, the legendary baseball player. Gary Cooper, one of old Hollywood's biggest name actors. Ben Corbett, Western character actor who appeared in no less than 280 films, often as a comedy sidekick. One of his characters was Magpie in Tim McCoy Western movies. Marion Davies, legendary silent film actress. Joan Davis, popular comedian of film, radio, and television. Star of I Married Joan. John Eldridge, actor. This guy was so good he should have been more famous. He had a long career, but rarely broke out of small parts in movies and television. One of my favorite things he did was play the dad on the comedy TV series Meet Corliss Archer, a major role he very much deserved. Harry Gribben, silent movie comedy star. He was very popular at the time, but not very well known now. Why is this? Most of his films have been lost. Dashiell Hammett, one of the greatest mystery writers of all time. He created the characters of Sam Spade, Nick and Nora Charles from his Thin Man series, and the comic strip Secret Agent X9, among other works. Ernest Hemingway, the legendary author, died by suicide. Chico Marx, one of the main three Marx Brothers comedy team. Grandma Moses, the famous painter. Leo Reisman, one of the famous band leaders of the big band era. Gail Russell, popular film and TV actress, died of alcoholism at the too young age of 36. Anna May Wong. She was the first Chinese-American film star in Hollywood and the first to receive international recognition. On January 3rd, President Eisenhower announced that the United States has severed diplomatic and consular relations with Cuba. This is relevant because relations with Cuba were not restored until 2015. John F. Kennedy became the first U.S. president to be inaugurated on color television. This happened on the NBC network, January 20th. Just 5 days after this, JFK became the first president to hold a live, televised presidential press conference. Mel Blanc, the most famous cartoon voice artist who ever lived, was in a terrible car accident on January 24th that left him in a coma for 2 weeks. It happened on the infamous Dead Man's Curve in Los Angeles. Blanc recovered, and it wasn't too long after his coma that he was recording voices in his hospital room. Physically, it would take a bit longer to heal. Blanc was also a popular character actor in shows like the Jack Benny program. He returned to that show for that year's Christmas episode, but had to get around on crutches in a wheelchair. On January 31st, Ham, a chimpanzee, becomes the first great ape to go into space. His mission was a success, and he lived until 1983 at the ripe old age of 25. President Kennedy established the Peace Corps on March 1st. The Barbie doll gets a boyfriend when Ken is introduced on March 11th. It's hard to imagine Barbie without Ken. Long before court TV or anything like it, the very first televised trial was aired in 1961, beginning April 11th. It was the Adolf Eichmann trial, a Holocaust perpetrator. He was ultimately sentenced to hang. The infamous American invasion of Cuba, called the Bay of Pigs, begins on April 17th. It's over by April 19th. It didn't do anything but make Fidel Castro, leader of Cuba, just a little bit madder at the American government. Have you ever heard of TV being called a vast wasteland? Sure you have, somewhere. but you probably never knew who first said it. It happened on May 9th. FCC Chairman Newton N. Minow made a speech about television and the public interest. In this speech, he referred to commercial television programming as a vast wasteland. On July 25th, President Kennedy gives a speech on the Berlin crisis, but the biggest takeaway was his urging of Americans to build fallout shelters. Paranoia about being blasted by nuclear bombs was at a fever pitch, and a lot of people were scared. Construction of the Berlin Wall begins on August 13th. The very first Six Flags amusement park opens up in Arlington, Texas on August 1st. It's called Six Flags Over Texas, and as of 2023 is still in operation. The CTV network was started in Canada on October 1st. This became the country's first privately owned network. Up until then, the only major network in Canada was the CBC, a public broadcaster. Popular comedian Lucille Ball marries Gary Morton on November 19th. It proved to be a much more successful marriage than the one she had with previous co-star Desi Arnaz. American involvement in the Vietnam War officially begins on December 11th. Ireland gets its first national television station, Telefís Éireann, on New Year's Eve. Popular tunes of 1961. The classic era of rock and roll was still putting out great big monster hits. At this point in the 1960s, a lot of songs still sounded like they came from the 1950s. Rock and roll was the dominant form of music. Country was popular, and there were some big country hits, but the genre certainly took a backseat to rock and roll. Blues was becoming a bit better known. It wasn't impossible to get on the charts because Howlin' Wolf and Freddie King did it, but it was very, very hard. Blues music seemed to sell better in album form than in singles. Folk music was starting to creep into popularity, but it had not yet hit its stride. 1961 was a fascinating year for music. It's almost impossible to list every song that came out this year, but what follows are the highlights. The Boys of 1961. Special mention, Surf Rock is Born. Dick Dale is considered the father of surf rock music. In April of 1961, he released what is considered the first surf rock song, Let's Go Trippin'. It was a regional hit in California and a minor hit nationally, but it set things in motion. Soon there would be a lot of super successful surf rock acts like the Beach Boys, Jan and Dean. Even the Ventures started playing a lot of surf music. Dick Dale gets a lot more acclaim now than he did back then, but he still deserves a lot more attention. In November of this year, the Beach Boys released their first single, Surfin'. It was only a regional hit, but it set things in motion for one of the biggest selling and longest lasting rock and roll acts of all time. Elvis Presley. Are You Lonesome Tonight was a song he released in late 1960 that still charted highly in the early part of 1961. His biggest song released in 1961 was the super hit Surrender, backed with the less successful Lonely Man. However, Can't Help Falling in Love, another number one hit, is probably even better known to listeners today. That song was backed with another popular hit, Rock-a-Hula Baby. Elvis had a peculiar single that came out shortly after Surrender. The A-side, Wild in the Country, was the title track of a movie he had made. It did alright on the charts, but was not as successful as the B-side, I Feel So Bad, that did much, much better. He had a double A-side hit single with Marie's the Name, His Latest Flame, on one side and Little Sister on the other. Little Sister is just a great upbeat song. Elvis had 2 albums this year. The first was the studio album, Something for Everybody. It did very well because, hey, it's Elvis. But one of the albums people know him best for is the soundtrack of Blue Hawaii. The popular title song of the film was released as a single the next year. Ricky Nelson. One of my personal favorite Ricky Nelson songs, Hello Mary Lou, came out this year. It was the flip side to his biggest hit that year, the number one Travelin' Man. He had another single, A Wonder Like You, backed with Ever Lovin', that wasn't quite as successful. He also had an album called Rick is 21. This is the year the name change from Ricky to Rick Nelson started. Odd enough, his first single that year went by Ricky, but this album and the second single went by Rick. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a major Ricky Nelson fan. He always was and will always be Ricky. The whole Rick business doesn't fly with me, and I don't think it really took with anyone, then or now. Most people, his biggest fans mind you, have always referred to him as Ricky. I know he went to Rick to make himself seem more mature and cool, but he didn't need to. Roy Orbison. Elvis Presley and Ricky Nelson are fantastic, that's true. But for pure singing talent alone, there really isn't anyone better than Roy Orbison. 1961 was another good year for him. He had two singles. Running Scared was a number one hit, backed with his little-known cover version of Love Hurts. The latter was originally recorded by the Everly Brothers. It wouldn't be a major hit until 1974 when it was covered by Nazareth, becoming one of that group's biggest songs and a radio staple. Roy's second single was the number 2 hit Crying, backed with another successful song, Candyman. He also had 2 albums this year. Chubby Checker. If you're talking rock music in the early 60s, you've got to talk about Chubby Checker. A lot of people know him for The Twist from 1960, but he had a lot of other hits as well. 1961 saw Chubby release 5 singles and 4 albums. He released yet another album with Bobby Rydell. Pony Time was his biggest hit that year, reaching number 1 on the charts. It was backed with the extremely underrated non-album song Oh Susanna. That was a great song, so overlooked. His other real big singles that year were Let's Twist Again and The Fly. He also did a notable duet with Bobby Rydell of Jingle Bell Rock. The Everly Brothers. Their biggest songs this year were Walk Right Back and Ebony Eyes. They also had some minor hits with Temptation and Don't Blame Me, as well as 1 album. Bobby V. He had a real big number 1 hit this year with Take Good Care of My Baby. Run to Him was his other major success, but everything he released this year charted. Not bad considering the fact that he had 4 singles and 4 albums. Gary U.S. Bonds. 1961 was a continuation of the success Bonds enjoyed from 1960 with his first big hit, New Orleans. This year he had another big hit with Quarter to Three. Other hits include School Is Out and the lesser hit School Is In. He also had his first album this year. Cliff Richard is just plain big in Britain. He never stopped being big. His popularity will outlive him long after he's gone. He had an amazing 3 albums this year, with one of them being a soundtrack and 7 singles. When the Girl in Your Arms is the Girl in Your Heart, A Girl Like You, Theme for a Dream, and Gee Whiz It's You were the biggest. Amazingly, a cover he did of Ray Charles' famous What I Say flopped. A cover of Chuck Berry's 40 Days didn't do much better. The Shadows, without Cliff Richard, had their first album this year and 5 singles and 2 EPs. All but one of their singles charted this year and were big hits. The hits include FBI, The Frightened City, The Savage, and Kon-Tiki, their biggest hit that year. It took a long time, but FBI became very well known in America as the years went on, due to the fact that so many people covered it. My favorite cover version is the one Mick Ronson played when he was with Ian Hunter's band. This tune should be in action movies. More Boys. Babysittin' Boogie by Buzz Clifford. Barbara Ann by The Regents. This was the original hit version. Jan and Dean recorded it the next year. The most famous version was released by the Beach Boys in 1965. Big Bad John by Jimmy Dean, a number 1 country hit. Blue Moon by the Marcells, a #1 hit. This classic doo-wop song for sure sounds like it should be from the 1950s, but it is indeed from 1961. Even more strange, it was a cover of a song that had been recorded as early as 1935. As a matter of fact, there were 2 hit recordings of Blue Moon in 1949. Bristol Stomp by the Dovells, another song that sounds like it should be from the 50s. This is pretty energized, and you can't listen to it without wanting to jump around real crazy like. Calcutta by Lawrence Welk. This #1 hit became the biggest selling recording of Welk's career. It was first released in December of 1960, but hit pay dirt in 1961. It was originally a German pop song from 1958 that had lyrics. Welk's version was an instrumental. It became so hugely popular that many cover versions have been released, almost always instrumental. Even younger people act like the Ventured covered this tune. Calendar Girl by Neil Sedaka. Daddy's Home by Shep and the Limelights. Don't Worry by Marty Robbins, a #1 country hit. Gypsy Woman by The Impressions. Hello Walls by Farron Young, a #1 country hit. Hideaway by Freddie King. This upbeat blues instrumental became a standard and has been performed by countless people. Hit the Road Jack by Ray Charles, a #1 hit. I Don't Know Why, But I Do by Clarence Frogman Henry. I Don't Want to Cry by Chuck Jackson. I Like It Like That, Part 1 by Chris Kenner. Last Night by the Marquees. The Lion Sleeps Tonight by the Tokens, a #1 hit. A Little Bit of Soap by the Jarmels. Little Boy Sad by Johnny Burnett. Little Egypt, Yin Yang by the Coasters. Getcha. Michael by the Highwaymen. This folk group first released their now famous version of the song in 1960, but it didn't become a #1 hit until 1961. This is still the best known version of Michael Rowed the Boat Ashore. Moody River by Pat Boone. This #1 hit is one of his biggest songs. Mother-in-Law by Ernie K. Doe, a #1 hit. This is a funny but unflattering song about a man's mother-in-law. Odd enough, Ernie K. Doe actually liked his real mother-in-law a great deal. My True Story by the Jive 5. North to Alaska by Johnny Horton, a #1 country hit. On the Rebound by Floyd Kramer. This country pianist had another big hit this year as well with San Antonio Rose. Peppermint Twist Part 1 by Joey D and the Starlighters. Pretty Little Angel Eyes by Curtis Lee. Raindrops by Dee Clark. Red Rooster by Howlin' Wolf. This song became a blues standard and is better known today by the title Little Red Rooster. Runaround Sue by Dion, a #1 hit. He had another big hit this year with The Wanderer. Runaway by Del Shannon, a #1 hit. Shop Around by The Miracles. This #1 hit became Motown's first million seller. It had first been released in the fall of 1960. Stand By Me by Ben E. King. This was a major hit. He was also still enjoying the success of the previous year's Spanish Harlem. Stranger on the Shore by Acker Bilk. This #1 hit was a clarinet instrumental. Sukiyaki by Kyo Sakamoto. The success of this song is peculiar. It's not your standard rock or pop song. It was first released in Japan this year. It ended up topping the charts in a number of countries, but wouldn't hit #1 in America until 1963. This went on to become one of the best-selling singles of all time, selling over 13 million copies worldwide. There were a lot of cover versions of this song in the 1960s. So with the song this successful, the question remains, how come Kyo Sakamoto isn't a bigger name than he is? And why isn't Sukiyaki played more often on the radio? This is one of those really big successes that is nearly in obscurity today. I'm guessing there are at least 10 songs I've mentioned so far that you know better than this one, and although they were hits, they didn't sell like Sukiyaki. Tender Years by George Jones, a #1 country hit. There's a Moon Out Tonight by the Capris. This Time by Troy Shondell. Tossin' and Turnin' by Bobby Lewis. This song was originally released in December of 1960, but it didn't become a #1 hit until July of 1961. This song is so hugely popular that it's hard to believe it took so long to hit. Town Without Pity by Gene Pitney. Turn On Your Love Light by Bobby Bland. Walk On By Leroy Van Dyke, a #1 country hit. Wonderland by Night by Bert Kaempfert. This #1 hit took a long time to be successful. It was recorded in July of 1959. It was released over a year later in August 1960. It took until January of 1961 to strike it big, becoming Bert's first hit. Ya Ya by Lee Dorsey. The Girls of 1961. Patsy Cline. Commercially, this was a good year for the legendary country singer. She didn't have an easy road to success. In 1957, she had one big hit song, Walkin' After Midnight, then zip until 1961. She released a lot of singles between those years, but nothing happened. This year she had two big songs, I Fall to Pieces and Crazy. She also had an album called Showcase. By the way, Crazy was written by future superstar Willie Nelson. Brenda Lee. She became one of the best-selling female artists of the 20th century. This is probably due to her crossover appeal. Brenda's songs could be rockabilly, pop, or country, sometimes all at once. She was able to reach a lot of different people with different musical tastes. Brenda had 4 big hit songs and 2 albums this year. The hits include Emotions, You Can Depend on Me, Dum Dum, and Fool Number 1. Linda Scott. This is probably not a name you're very familiar with. Why? It's a puzzle. 1961 was a good year for her. Her best year, commercially speaking. She had 3 big hits, including her biggest, I've Told Every Little Star, Don't Bet Money Honey, and I Don't Know Why. She did have some more songs that charted through 1965, but nothing as big as these 3. She also had her first album this year. Linda Scott was on TV quite a bit until she retired from show business in 1967. For some reason or another, she is an incredibly undervalued singer of the classic rock and roll era who was, indeed, a big star in her heyday of 1961. It's a shame that her songs aren't played more often on classic rock stations. She deserves to be kept in modern memory. Connie Francis. This was a good year for Connie. Her biggest song this year was Where the Boys Are, but she had others like Breaking in a Brand New Heart, Together, He's My Dreamboat, and When the Boy in Your Arms is the Boy in Your Heart. She also had 7 albums. The Shirelles. When they first released Dedicated to the One I Love in 1959, it didn't sell very well at all. It was re-released in 1961 and became a major hit. Timing is everything. Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow was another odd success for the group. This is another case of a song released in 1960 that didn't hit #1 until 1961. Other big successes for them this year include Mama Said, Baby It's You, and Big John Ain't You Gonna Marry Me. More girls. Oh, girls, girls, sure do love them. Oh, girls. At Last by Etta James. Every Beat of My Heart by Gladys Knight and the Pips, their first hit. Gee Whiz, Look at His Eyes by Carla Thomas. Heartbreak USA by Kitty Wells, a #1 country hit. I Know You Don't Love Me No More by Barbara George. I Love How You Love Me by the Paris Sisters, their first and biggest hit. It's Gonna Work Out Fine by Ike and Tina Turner. This became their second million-selling song after their earlier hit A Fool in Love. It was also their first Grammy nomination. The Mountains High by Dick and Dee Dee. This group is just awesome. Dick is unique in the way that he can sing in a deep voice as well as the real high notes. These two were good together and they recorded a lot of great songs, but this was their biggest. Please Mr. Postman by the Marvelettes, a #1 hit. There's No Other Like My Baby by the Crystals. This is the debut single from the famous girl group. It did alright, but wasn't a monster big hit. It was also the first release from legendary producer Phil Spector's Phillies Records label. To add to Phil Spector's infamy, he neglected to pay the Crystals for their work on this song. TV debuts of 1961. 1961 was a weird year for television. For movies too, but that's another subject. This year didn't produce a lot of hit shows, but the ones that did become successful were often mega hits that lasted for years. Action shows. The Avengers. Long before Marvel's Avengers, there was the British spy series The Avengers. This first season of the series, originally airing on the ITV network in England, was quite different than the show most people know. There were two guys. Ian Hendry, as David Keel, was the lead, with his sidekick John Steed, played by Patrick Macnee. The series got its name for the fact that they were avenging the death of Keel's fiancée. After the first season, Ian Hendry left. Macnee became the male lead, and he was joined by a succession of sexy women sidekicks. The most famous would be Diana Rigg as Emma Peel for the 4th and 5th seasons. Comedy shows. Car 54, Where Are You? This great and very well-liked show lasted only 2 seasons. The series did a very good job of making cops funny, but likable as well. Fred Gwynne was one of the 2 main stars. Al Lewis became a very big part of the supporting cast. Both of these guys would go on to star in the Munsters TV series. The Dick Van Dyke Show. This was a very big hit and good for the careers of everyone involved. Mary Tyler Moore, who played the wife, became a superstar from this, ultimately starting her own production company, MTM Enterprises, which was responsible for many popular TV shows. Hazel. This was a great, easy-to-take comedy show. Shirley Booth, who had been a serious dramatic actress, really shined as the not-serious Hazel, maid to the Baxter family. It was based on the popular cartoons from the Saturday Evening Post magazine. Mr. Ed. This long-running series is a rare example of a show that originally aired in syndication, but was picked up by a major network. The first season was in syndication. The remaining 5 seasons aired on CBS. No one expected this show about a talking horse to be a hit, including the cast. The show became super popular in short order, and everyone involved was proud of their product. Plus, Mr. Ed was a very talented and award-winning animal actor. Other shows. ABC's Wide World of Sports. The popular sports program started this year and ran until 1998. Ben Casey, the popular doctor show starring Vince Edwards. The Mike Douglas Show. This long-running daytime talk show ran for 20 years. It was originally aired as a local show in Cleveland, Ohio. In 1965, it became a national show and moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was an unusual but still lighthearted kind of talk show. Mike Douglas had been a big band era singer in his younger days. However, he was always very open to new talent and featured a lot of hip, brand new acts on his show. Older, more traditional entertainers would appear as guests on the same show, and everyone got along. He often gave TV exposure to young up-and-comers that no other TV show would want to acknowledge. These same people would often become superstars, like Kiss, for instance. NBC Saturday Night at the Movies. This was significant and spawned many imitators. It was the first TV show to broadcast, in color, relatively recent feature films from major studios. Before this, TV liked to air way old black and white, low-budget movies that had no chance of being reshown in theaters. This programming block ran until 1978, but it didn't truly go away. The major networks continued to air movies regularly for decades. Since then, entire cable channels, even streaming services, have carried on with the idea. Password. The very first version of the popular game show debuted this year. Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. This wasn't really a new series, but another retooling of the Disneyland show. It changed networks from ABC to NBC. It was also now in color. The new cartoon character of Ludwig von Drake was introduced. TV celebrity debuts of 1961. James Caan made his screen debut on an episode of Route 66. Dabney Coleman made his first appearance in an episode of the police show Naked City. Gene Hackman debuted in the cop show Tallahassee 7000. John Hurt debuted in the British TV series Probation Officer. Last, but not least, the movies of 1961. 1961 was as weird of a year for movies as it was for television. In comparison to some years before and after this, there wasn't nearly as much output. Some movies were extremely successful, but so many more were box office failures. Some of the movies that underperformed in 1961 would later become cult favorites or straight-up classics. There didn't seem to be one genre of movie that stood out over the others. Just about every category had at least one notable hit. Except westerns. Westerns did terrible this year. Cowboys were just about played out, even on television. Traditional musicals were just about dead, with the strong exception of West Side Story, the biggest movie of the year. See how weird 1961 was for movies? Check these out. Elvis movies. Elvis had two movies this year, Wild in the Country and Blue Hawaii. The first one is a bomb, a rarity for Elvis. The second one is known, at least by name, to just about everyone who knows Elvis. It's one of his biggest box office successes. The soundtrack album was also extremely popular. Rock and roll movies. Hey, Let's Twist. Joey D and the Starlighters were the headliners of this successful film that featured other big acts like Joanne Campbell, she was so awesome, and Teddy Randazzo. The success of this movie led to another Joey D movie the next year called Two Tickets to Paris. Teenage Millionaire. This is a rare movie, but I'm not sure why. Jimmy Clanton was the star. It also featured such big acts as Dion, Jackie Wilson, Chubby Checker, Vicky Spencer, Bill Black's combo, and others. Legendary comedian Zazu Pitts was also in it. It deserves a watching for the name draw alone. Twist All Night, also known as the Continental Twist. Louis Prima and Sam Botera were the musical stars. Extremely popular model and actress June Wilkinson was also in it. Twist Around the Clock. A Chubby Checker movie. He certainly deserved one. He kickstarted the dance song craze of the early 1960s. This movie also featured Dion, Vicky Spencer, and the Marcells. It even had good character actors like Alvy Moore and Tall Avery. It made a lot of money and led to a sequel the next year, also starring Chubby Checker, called Don't Knock the Twist. The Young Ones. starring British rock stars Cliff Richard and the Shadows. Jerry Lewis movies. The Ladies' Man marked the debut of his famous catchphrase, "Hey lady!" His other movie this year was The Errand Boy. These were typical Jerry Lewis films that did well enough, but weren't super hits. Comic adaptations. Dondi. Based on the comic strip of the same name, this live-action family comedy did poorly. Although David Corey, who played Dondi, was an unknown child actor, his GI buddy, Dealey, was played by David Jansen. Jansen had recently finished his popular TV series Richard Diamond Private Detective, but would become most famous for his next series, The Fugitive, in 1963. Tintin and the Golden Fleece. This live-action movie, made in France, is based on the popular Tintin comic books from Belgium. Although better known in Europe, an English-dubbed version exists. Tintin comics, cartoons, even movies eventually find their way to America. A less successful sequel was released in 1964. Other comedy movies. The Absent-Minded Professor. This major hit film starred Fred MacMurray as the inventor of flying rubber, better known as Flubber. This became the very first Disney movie to get a sequel just 2 years later, called Son of Flubber. Breakfast at Tiffany's. You still hear about this movie in one way or another. This romantic comedy starred Audrey Hepburn, George Peppard, Buddy Ebsen, and Mickey Rooney. It was a major moneymaker. Come September. This romantic comedy hit starred Rock Hudson, Gina Lollobrigida, Sandra Dee, and Bobby Darin. Gidget Goes Hawaiian. This is the popular sequel to the 1959 film Gidget. Deborah Wally now plays Gidget, replacing Sandra Dee. Like the previous movie, it's a beach comedy film with musical numbers. This kind of movie got even more popular when surf rock music started getting big. The Great Imposter. Tony Curtis starred in this comedy drama about the real-life imposter Ferdinand de Mera, infamous for impersonating all kinds of people, just for kicks. This movie was a good enough moneymaker, but not one of Curtis's biggest films. However, Curtis claimed this to be his favorite role. Lover Come Back. One of the classic romantic comedies with Rock Hudson, Doris Day, and Tony Randall. A hit. Mr. Topaz, also known as I Like Money in America. This movie was not a success. It stars Peter Sellers and was also his directorial debut. What is odd about this movie is that just 2 years later, in 1963, he would hit big with the first Pink Panther film. Like that film, this film was set in France, he played a French character, and it was a crime caper. One of his co-stars was Herbert Lom, who would end up becoming the long-suffering Chief Inspector Dreyfus, beginning with the second Pink Panther movie. The biggest difference, however, is that Mr. Topaz was just not as endearing of a character as Inspector Clouseau. The Parent Trap. This Disney comedy film was a huge hit. Haley Mills played a dual role of identical twins separated at birth when their parents divorced. Maureen O'Hara and Brian Keith played the parents. Little known fact, these two were in another movie together in 1961, The Deadly Companions, a serious western. That didn't do anywhere near as well as The Parent Trap. The Pleasure of His Company. A movie with singers and dancers that wasn't a musical but straight comedy, and it was a hit. Fred Astaire had given up dancing on screen as he felt he was getting too old. He did dance a little during the party sequence and even sang for a little bit, but there were no musical numbers. Debbie Reynolds, Tab Hunter, and Lily Palmer were the other main stars along with Charlie Ruggles and Elvia Allman. Pocketful of Miracles. This starred Glenn Ford and Betty Davis with a large name cast including, but not limited to, Peter Falk, Anne Margaret, Edward Everett Horton, Sheldon Leonard, Ellen Corby, Jackie Lamb, Mike Mazurki, Doodles Weaver, George E. Stone, Jay Novello, and Benny Rubin. It made money, but wasn't a major hit. It was also nominated for a lot of awards. Snow White and the Three Stooges. You probably know the basic story of the real Three Stooges. They were real famous for a long time, then they weren't, then they made a big comeback, then they all died off. Well, this movie was made during their big comeback. It was actually their second feature film. What happened with this movie? It flopped. Big time. It was their only feature that was filmed in color, but it was their least popular. Fortunately, this movie didn't kill their career. The Stooges still went on to make more movies. The biggest problem with this movie wasn't the quality, but the fact that too much money was put into it. Color cost a lot of money. The film was aimed at a children's audience. Kids paid less for movie tickets. Back then, it would have taken over 15 million kids buying tickets to break even. In other words, the studio made a big oopsie. On the bright side, the Stooges finally got their big budget feature. Tammy Tell Me True, the second movie in the Tammy series. Sandra Dee replaced Debbie Reynolds. This did well, and it has a good cast of supporting actors. The Tammy movies are gentle comedies, certainly not in-your-face material. These are made to be easy to take. Adventure movies. 5 Minutes to Live. Country singer Johnny Cash is the star of this action crime thriller. He's the bad guy, and he goes down hard. This movie was actually a big money-making hit. Despite this, Johnny only acted in one other theatrical film. After this, he acted in several TV movies and did voiceover work. Goliath Against the Giants. A Hercules-type film, although the character was called Goliath. It was Brad Harris's debut as a lead actor. The Guns of Navarone. This World War II war movie was a colossal success and starred Gregory Peck, David Niven, Anthony Quinn, and Richard Harris. Hercules and the Conquest of Atlantis. One of the many Hercules movies made in the 60s. This starred bodybuilder Reg Park in his film debut. Hercules and the Haunted World. Reg Park stars as Hercules. Christopher Lee plays his nemesis and evil king. The Naked Edge. Gary Cooper starred in this thriller movie, his final role. It was released after his death. It was a big hit. It also starred Deborah Kerr and Peter Cushing. Yojimbo. This Japanese samurai film was made by Toho Productions, the same company famous for Godzilla. It was a critical and commercial success. A lot of films from all over the world have gone to use this film's basic story idea of an anti-hero pitting two criminal gangs against each other. Some critics say this is one of the greatest films ever made. It does have American fans, but this never became an American mainstream film. The heavily borrowed premise, however, should be very familiar to you. Westerns. Westerns didn't do very well this year. There were a lot of big-budget westerns with big-name stars that bombed. It was clear that the era of Hollywood producing a ton of mainstream western movies was coming to a close. Since the mid-1960s, Hollywood occasionally comes out with a big western, but for the most part, this genre has been relegated to B productions from independent studios. It is unnecessary to list all of the western movies this year, but here are some that didn't make it, and I bet you'll be surprised. The Misfits. This movie, by name power alone, should not have been a bomb, but it was. It was a modern-day western with Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe as the leads. It was the last completed film for both of them. The film was released after Gable's death, but before Monroe's. Even with that fact, it hasn't helped the movie become better known to audiences today. The only thing that has come from it is more favorable reception from critics who dub it a masterpiece and one of the best films of the 60s. This movie also had other big-name actors like Montgomery Clift, Eli Wallach, Kevin McCarthy, and old cowboy star Rex Bell in a cameo, just to name a few. The Last Sunset. Rock Hudson and Kirk Douglas starred in this Western bomb. One-Eyed Jacks. Marlon Brando was the star of this Western. It was also the only film he directed. This was a big bomb, despite having a very big cast including Carl Malden, Ben Johnson, Slim Pickens, Alicia Cook Jr., among others. It fell into the public domain, and seems to be better liked today than it was back then, but it's still not a very famous film. Posse from Hell. A little remembered Western movie, but I'm not sure why. It had a lot of big-name talent in it, including Audie Murphy, John Saxon, Vic Morrow, Royal Dano, Lee Van Cleef, Harry Lauder, and Alan Lane, cowboy star and the voice of Mr. Ed himself. Plus, you would think the title of the movie would draw people in. Still, this remains in obscurity. Two Rode Together. John Ford was the director, famous for his John Wayne westerns. James Stewart was the star, along with Richard Widmark and Shirley Jones. It even had legendary Western funnyman Andy Devine. Other stars included Ken Curtis, Jeanette Nolan, Woody Strode, and Ted Knight. This movie bombed so hard. The names on the poster should have been enough to sell this to ticket buyers, but it didn't. Horror and science fiction movies. The Beast of Yucca Flats. Famous bad guy actor Tor Johnson starred as the Beast. This is considered to be one of the very worst movies ever made. It was extremely low budget, was not a great hit at the time, but has since become somewhat famous in spite of itself, due to all those people who watch those so bad they're good movies. The Curse of the Werewolf. Hammer Films from England tried their hand at modernizing the Wolfman type films. They had previous success with Frankenstein, Dracula, and The Mummy. For whatever reason, this movie was not as successful as those. It's not even particularly hated by audiences. This just seems to be one of those movies that fell through the cracks. Gorgo. This is a British-made Godzilla-type film. It's actually a smart monster movie with a good story and good acting. It did well enough in theaters and became a big comic book series for the Charlton publisher that ran from 1961 to 65. The comics, likewise, are quite clever. Conga. I'm surprised the makers of this film could get away with doing this. It's a ripoff of King Kong, simply renamed Conga. The story is different, so it's not a remake, but just the same, it's a thinly veiled copy of King Kong. It was popular enough to get a comic book series from the Charlton publisher that lasted from this year until 1965, with reprints continuing until 1968. Master of the World. Based on the awesome story by Jules Verne. It wasn't the most faithful adaptation, as it took elements from that book and an earlier Jules Verne novel, mashed them together, and did some other retweaks besides. It had to be made less fantastic than the book itself, due to budget and technological limitations. In 1961, it really wasn't possible to make a realistic, convincing adaptation of the original story. The basic idea of the movie's plot is that a madman inventor named Robert has made an incredible airship in a bid for world domination. Vincent Price was the villain, reportedly one of his favorite roles. It was also the first time Charles Bronson was cast as the romantic, heroic leading man of a theatrical film. This did well enough, and a sequel was valued, but they basically wrote themselves in a corner with the way this film story was constructed, so it didn't happen. Mothra, the first film of the famous monster moth. He eventually became a big character in the Godzilla movies. After Toho's first two Godzilla movies, the company wanted to branch off into other monster movies. Mothra proved to be popular, second in popularity only to Godzilla. The unique thing about Mothra is that the character was always presented as good. Mysterious Island, based loosely on the Jules Verne novel. This science fiction adventure movie had its fans. The story is a sequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Unlike the 1954 film that Disney made, This film was made by Amarin Films for Columbia Pictures. A group of prisoners in the American Civil War escape in a hot air balloon. They end up on a mysterious island populated by giant and tiny animals. Still, the men don't think they're the only people on the island. Eventually, they learn that Captain Nemo, in his fantastic submarine the Nautilus, has been hiding out on the island. He helps the men escape the island, as a volcano is about to destroy it. Nemo, however, stays behind as the Nautilus is damaged beyond repair and he doesn't want to leave. The Pit and the Pendulum. Based loosely on the Edgar Allan Poe story, this successful B-movie starred Vincent Price and Barbara Steele. This did so well that American International Pictures and producer Roger Corman agreed to do another 6 movies based on Edgar Allan Poe stories. 5 of these would again star Vincent Price. These movies, more than anything else, kept the stories of Edgar Allan Poe in public memory during the 1960s. Reptilicus, a Danish-American joint production about a giant prehistoric reptile. It actually did well at the box office and got a comic book series from the Charlton publisher. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. This science fiction adventure film was a major hit. It featured a large ensemble cast and involved the nuclear submarine going deep into the ocean in a bid to save the world from disaster. Danger lurks inside and outside the sub. The cast includes Walter Pidgeon, Joan Fontaine, Barbara Eden, Peter Lorre, Robert Sterling, Michael Ansara, Frankie Avalon, Howard McNear, and Robert Easton, among others. The success of this film would lead to a popular TV series that ran from 1964 to 68. Drama and romance movies. Backstreet. This did well in theaters, but is little remembered today. It starred Susan Hayward and John Gavin. This is some sordid soap opera stuff, but nothing as edgy as Peyton Place. Just a standard drama movie. El Cid. This was huge. It seems to be largely ignored today, but it made lots and lots of money at the time. This starred Charlton Heston and Sophia Loren. It was an epic historical drama based loosely on the life of El Cid himself, a warlord in medieval Spain. Fanny. This romantic drama film was a big hit and starred Leslie Caron, Charles Boyer, and Maurice Chevalier. The George Raft Story. This biopic about the famous actor George Raft starred Ray Danton. It was a largely fictionalized account of the actor's messed up life with only kernels of truth. Jane Mansfield was the leading lady. It also starred Julie London, Frank Gorshin, Barbara Nichols, Jack Albertson, and Neville Brand as Al Capone. George Raft himself lived another 19 years after this movie was released. This movie is mocked heavily for its falsehoods, but still has an audience. It was even referenced on an episode of The Andy Griffith Show. The Hustler. This romantic sports drama about pool hustling was a major hit. Jackie Gleason, who was already a superstar, became even more famous with his role of Minnesota Fats. Gleason played a lot of memorable characters, and Minnesota Fats ranks right up there with Ralph Cramden, Joe the Bartender, and Smokey. Judgment at Nuremberg, a courtroom drama that had a large ensemble cast of big-name actors and was a major moneymaker at the box office. La Dolce Vita. This Italian film was originally released in 1960 and became a smash success all over Europe. It wasn't released in America until 1961, but became a hit over there too. It made a name out of director Federico Fellini and a major international sex symbol of Anita Ekberg, although she had been around for almost a decade. It's a comedy satire and drama. It was also deemed controversial, especially by the Catholic Church. King of Kings. Jesus becomes a movie star. Jeffrey Hunter plays Jesus in this telling of his life story. It was a major hit. Parish. This drama film, centered around tobacco growers, was actually a big commercial success, but it's just not that celebrated. It had a big-name cast including Troy Donahue, Claudette Colbert, Carl Malden, Dean Jagger, Connie Stevens, Diane McBain, Dub Taylor, Hayden Rourke, and Carol O'Connor. Donahue at one time said it was his favorite role. A Raisin in the Sun. Sidney Poitier starred in this drama about black life that initially bombed in theaters, but gained a following after the fact and is now considered a classic. Return to Peyton Place. The successful sequel to the earlier film Peyton Place. This made a lot of money, but nowhere near as much as the 1957 original. Anyone who knows what Peyton Place is will tell you it was one big messed up soap opera. Over-the-top drama to the max. Splendor in the Grass. This drama film, set in the late 1920s to early 1930s, starred Natalie Wood and Warren Beatty. It was a big hit. Susan Slade. This teen drama starred Connie Stevens and Troy Donahue. It was financially successful, but quickly forgotten. Town Without Pity. This movie, set in 1960 occupied Germany, starred Kirk Douglas and was not a great success. However, the title song from the soundtrack, recorded by Gene Pitney, became a huge hit. It was nominated for an Academy Award and became Pitney's first top 40 hit. This is one of those rare instances where the song from a film is more popular than anything else about the film. You've probably been a fan of this song for years and never knew it came from a movie. Musicals. Babes in Toyland. Disney's version of the classic operetta was a flop. It's not remembered as well as the 1934 film with Laurel and Hardy. It was only the second theatrical version, but 3 TV adaptations had been made between the 2 movies. This film bears little resemblance to the Laurel and Hardy movie. It starred Ray Bolger, Tommy Sands, Annette Funicello, and Ed Wynn. This was Funicello's favorite filmmaking experience, despite the fact that it didn't do well. The toy soldiers from this movie, however, became quite iconic for Disney during the company's holiday promotions. They just looked kind of cool. Flower Drum Song. At the time of this film's release, it did poorly at the box office. It is the only Hollywood movie, based on a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, to lose money. It was, however, nominated for many awards, and a lot of people came to enjoy this movie later on. It's still a well-liked musical. It was the first Hollywood movie to star a mostly Asian cast. This wouldn't happen again until The Joy Luck Club in 1993, 32 years later. West Side Story. This musical drama film was an inner-city version of Romeo and Juliet, with whites and Puerto Ricans fighting each other. Natalie Wood was the big star. Rita Moreno received a lot of attention for her part in the film. This made an insane amount of money and was the biggest hit of the year. Film debuts of 1961. Film debuts of actors and actresses aren't always memorable, but the ones who came out this year enjoyed very long, successful careers. Anne Margaret as Louise in A Pocketful of Miracles. This was actually a decent part for a first-time film gig. She played the illegitimate daughter of Betty Davis, who starred as an apple peddler named Apple Annie. Ed Asner had been doing small parts on TV for a while before he made his film debut as Dave Keller in The Murder Men. This wasn't a big movie, but it had name actors in the lead roles including Peter Mark Richmond, James Coburn, and Dorothy Dandridge. Interesting enough, this was Ed Asner's first film and Dorothy Dandridge's last. Warren Beatty as Bud Stamper in Splendor in the Grass. If your first film role is the male lead opposite Natalie Wood, you're doing pretty good as an actor. He had been acting on TV since 1957, but this film broke him out as a name actor. By the late 1960s, he was an established superstar. Jack Cassidy as Gareth Lowell in Look in Any Window. This was a small part in a weird drama movie. He did more films, but was more famous for his TV and Broadway performances. John Davis Chandler as Mad Dog Cole in Mad Dog Cole. His first film was the leading role of a biopic about the real-life mob hitman. The movie was heavily fictionalized and it wasn't a great hit, but it set his career in motion. He did a lot of bit parts after this, but he was always working until his retirement in 1995. Mad Dog Cole was also the first film for Gene Hackman, who played a policeman in an uncredited role. He also made his television debut this year. Gene Hackman was one of those actors who was largely unnoticed until he first became noticed, and then BAM! Instant legend. Talking about big stars, Mad Dog Cole was also the first film for Telly Savalas, who played Lieutenant Darrow. Savalas had been acting on TV since 1959. He continued to play a lot of supporting roles in TV and movies until 1973 when he struck it big with the TV series Kojak. Louis Gossett Jr. as George Murchison in A Raisin in the Sun. To me, at least, Louis Gossett Jr. seemed like more of an 80s and 90s actor, but he got his start way back in 1961. The movie failed at the box office, but became a classic in the years since. To have your first part in a movie that people still talk about so many years later is a great achievement as an actor. George Kennedy as Nathan Dillon in The Little Shepherd of Kingdom Come. Kennedy had been acting on TV since 1956, most notably as the recurring character of military policeman Sergeant Kennedy on Sergeant Bilko. Little Shepherd was a Western movie that went largely unnoticed, but Kennedy kept getting bigger parts in bigger movies. He remained a big-name actor until his final film in 2014. Harvey Korman as Ken Carter in Living Venus. This exploitation film was inspired by Hugh Hefner, the real-life founder of Playboy magazine. Korman played the second lead of the film, a photographer. Technically, Korman's first film appearance was in a 1959 industrial short called Carving Magic, but this was his first part in an actual film. His breakout role was as a regular on the Danny Kaye Show variety program from 1963 to 67. After that, he got real famous as a player on the Carol Burnett Show from 1967 to 77. He basically remained a character actor until Carol Burnett, but after that he was a highly sought-after featured performer. If you had a movie or TV show, and you could get Harvey Korman to make an appearance, it was a good thing. He rarely got leading roles, but people looked forward to seeing him in an ensemble cast. Dudley Moore as piano player in The Third Alibi. This was an uncredited role in a British thriller film. He became so popular later on, it's hard to believe he had such a minuscule part in such a little-known movie. Hey, he had to start somewhere. Joe Pesci as dancer at the Peppermint Lounge in Hey, Let's Twist, a movie featuring Joey D and the Starlighters. This was an uncredited part. Joe Pesci traveled a long road to fame. In the early 1960s, he worked as a barber while trying to start a musical career. He played guitar with several bands, including Joey D and the Starlighters. His first album was in 1968, and he went by the name of Joe Ritchie. The album was covers of popular songs, and didn't sell fantastic. From 1970 to 76, he was part of a stand-up comedy duo with Frank Vincent, another actor you wouldn't guess was a stand-up comedian. Pesci's next film was a low-budget crime thriller in 1976 called The Death Collector. After that, he lived above an Italian restaurant where he was an employee. In 1979, director Martin Scorsese noticed Pesci's performance in The Death Collector and wanted him for a role in the now famous movie Raging Bull. That movie was released in 1980 and really kick-started Pesci's career as an actor. He became known for playing volatile bad guys or volatile funny men. Either way, Pesci's characters often had anger issues. His real big breakout came with the Lethal Weapon movies as comedy sidekick Leo Getz. He first appeared in Lethal Weapon 2 from 1989 and was in all the remaining movies. From 1989 onward, he just kept getting bigger parts in more good movies. Burt Reynolds as Hoke Adams in Angel Baby. For the major superstar Burt Reynolds became, he didn't enjoy a quick rise to fame. He started acting on TV in 1958. This first movie part was a significant supporting role. Still, it took until 1972 with the hit movie Deliverance before Burt Reynolds enjoyed his breakout role. His biggest all-time hit was Smokey and the Bandit in 1977. After that, Burt Reynolds always remained a big name, even if some of his movies weren't so hot. George Segal as Dr. Howard in The Young Doctors. This was a small part in an obscure movie that, strange enough, featured a lot of big-name actors. Segal's career took a long time to take off, despite the fact that he always worked and people really liked his performances. His first real breakout role was in the 1966 film Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, a super success in theaters that got him nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. After that, he started getting lead roles. The 60s and 70s were his decades. He always worked after that, but good roles were few and far between. The 1990s were kinder to him. He had a major role in the sitcom Just Shoot Me from 1997 to 2003. He continued to work after that, but his next major success was as Albert Pop Solomon, the grandpa on the sitcom The Goldbergs, from 2013 until his death in 2021. I know George did a lot of good stuff, but I still like his role in The Goldbergs the best. It was a well-played character on a well-done show, and if you see the show, he's definitely going to do something that will make you laugh. This was a full year. The 1950s weren't entirely over, but the 1960s, as we know the decade, wasn't firmly in place. In some ways, the world was becoming a scarier place. In other ways, it was becoming more interesting. For a lot of people, these were still the good times. Come back anytime you want another dose of the year 1961.